Welcome back to the Shine Within podcast. Andrea Leeb is a writer, advocate, and debut memoirist whose book, Such a Pretty Picture, has already been praised as, is air quotes, a moving memoir of trauma with an uplifting conclusion by Kirkus Reviews. With unflinching honesty, Andrea shares her story, her journey from surviving childhood sexual abuse and decades of silence to reclaiming her voice and healing. Her work has been featured in numerous can I speak today? Literary journals. And she was a nonfiction finalist in the Tuscan Festival of Books Awards. Andrea holds an MFA from Bennington Writing Seminars, a JD from Cardozo School of Law, and a BSN from Georgetown University. Today, she lives in Venice Beach, California, where she advocates for survivors of sexual assault, volunteers at the UCLA Rape Treatment Center and Stewart House, and mentors young women worldwide. And don't worry, Andrea, I always redo my intro. This is just
Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine.
I will be doing I because sometimes I always say, what did I just say? Tongue twister today. But anyway, I'm just raw and real, and I just like to be authentic when it comes to these conversations. So they're just more fun reading these bios. And if I mess up, I mess up like, it's okay. We have fun with it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on my show today. I'm really excited to hear about your journey, your story, and yes, congratulations on writing your book. I have it here. So for our listeners and actually viewers,
Oh,
because I do have it
thank
here.
you.
Thank you for this
And
beautiful
thank
book.
you, Gina, for having me and for showing the book cover. And so I appreciate
Yes,
it.
absolutely. Now, Andrea, your memoir, Such a Pretty Picture, is raw, brave, and deeply moving. What actually led you to finally put your story on paper and choose memoir as a way to share it?
Well, that's an interesting question because I actually have an MFA in creative writing from Bennington, and I had been in the fiction program, and I had always written fiction. I did never intended to write a memoir, and certainly not a memoir about my childhood. And although I wrote around it quite a bit, a lot of my short stories were stories where there was, family trauma, so to speak. But I think it was a confluence of two events, the Me Too movement in 2017 and my father's death. And when the Me Too movement started, I started reading other people's stories, of course, like we all did on Facebook and social media. And I began to think about my own story. And I remembered, how much using my voice and telling my story, not in a memoir form originally, but at first to a therapist and to I was in an inpatient program, to other members of the inpatient group that I was in, how much that's how I reclaimed my agency. I found my voice. And I thought, if I should share my story, maybe I can help. I'm a writer. I should write this. And maybe I will be able to help at least one person. That was my original intent for the story. So that's how I started, you know, writing the story. It's evolved a little. My intention has evolved a little bit, and we can talk more about that. But I unintentionally slid into advocacy the more I started writing. So
Wow. Now, I can tell you're a writer because I felt like I was you in the book. I was like, wow, this is incredible. By the way, you have like a great memory. Like I think I've kind of like shut everything down from my trauma. And I'm like, wow, she's very detailed. And I felt like I was in there with you. So beautiful, beautifully laid out how it's written. I really enjoyed that.
I have always had a good memory, which I write in the book. I kept trying to compartmentalize and stick all of those memories of abuse into a little black, metaphorical little black box. And there became a point where I just couldn't put the vestiges of trauma away, and I could no longer remember how to forget. So
Yeah. Now, writing about childhood trauma, I mean, even for me to talk about my own trauma is incredibly vulnerable. How did that writing process itself impact your own healing journey?
well, this is another interesting question. So I was, I thought I was healed by the time I started writing the book because the things that happened in the book, I was happened. I went for the most part from 1962 to 1993, and I was 33 for the most of the book, except for the epilogue when the book ended. So I thought that, by that time I had had decades of therapy, support groups, body work, doing body work, meditation. And so I thought I was healed. Of course, we know anybody who's a survivor of anything, any kind of trauma, we all learn eventually that healing isn't linear, that we don't walk away from that one sunny day and find everything is perfect. It's over now. I'm healed. This trauma stays with you. It's just you learn how to manage it differently. But I thought I was healed, and I was. In fact, I probably would never recommend somebody doing this deep an excavation of these memories without having had a significant amount of therapy, because it was a lot, and it was more than I anticipated. I think it was hard for me. I had a very complex relationship with my mother. She was aware of the abuse that happened. The abuse was perpetrated by my father from a very young age. I was 4 years old, 4.5 when it started. And my mother was, aware. The level of awareness, she knew. There's no doubt in my mind. And I mean, she caught him red-handed at one point. And, in the book, as opening of the book, you can see she goes blind, actually blind, physically blind for a month. So, but then regains her sight. So it was complicated because she was alive. And, I felt like I was betraying her. I'd always protected her. So I did what any good, healthy person would do. I wasn't in therapy when I started writing the book, and I went back to therapy. And I actually did a little bit of EMDR while I was writing. I was mostly finished with the book by the time we did that, which actually softens the memory a little bit. So that was a little bit later, but I went back into therapy. I knew that I needed the support, and I started doing yoga more. I actually had never really done yoga, and I found yoga, and I just found the resources that I needed to keep my feet on the ground, as it were.
Yes. Healing, it takes definitely time, and everybody's different. I was just sharing with you before we hit record about my abuse that I endured when I was a little girl. And, I think I masked it so much with
Mhm,
alcohol. I drowned it with alcohol, and I didn't want to share it with anybody. Nobody knew the secret until I was maybe 22 years old, where I
mhm,
was then heavily into drugs and alcohol. And my mom was like, okay, we need a family intervention. So she brought all my siblings. I'm the youngest out of four. And, my father had passed away. My biological father had passed away when I was a baby. And she, of course, no longer was with that man who abused me. They separated
mhm.
when I was like maybe 13 or so. But I kept it all a secret. It finally came out because they're like, why are you acting this way? I said, well, the reason why I'm probably acting this way is because I was sexually abused from these many years. And then
Mhm.
everyone like stood still and it was silent. And then my mom started asking me questions and then asking me about certain moles or anything around the genitalia area of him, and
Mhm.
and I told her everything, and for some reason she was still asking me questions. I felt like, well, why don't you believe me? And that was heartbreaking, not having your mom believe you. And I just didn't understand. And you know what the crazy part is, Andrea, is that it was never talked about afterward.
Mhm. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Wow. That was, my experience also was for a very long time, I kept this a secret. And I really believed that if I was smart enough, pretty enough, educated enough, I could pretend this abuse away. And, unfortunately, that's not the case. And I think that's one of the messages in my book is that for survivors who are suffering in silence, that you really need to tell your story to someone. You need to, and ideally, you need to get therapy or group support of some kind, and or coaching, as it were. You need to have someone to walk through this with, because if you don't tell and try to keep it a secret, the secret, I really believe it will kill you, whether it's through alcohol and drugs or through actual suicide or other behaviors. It's hard to say, but in the end, the result is always it's always the same. It's the secret's going to destroy you. It becomes, you're trying to prevent it from I mean, for me, I didn't want the trauma to become my life to be about trauma, but by keeping it secret, my life became about the trauma. So
Right. And what was it like to go ahead and finally break that silence?
when I was young, when I was in my 30s, it was freeing. I mean, it changed the trajectory of my life. I really realized for the first time that I had to protect myself, but I also felt like it was just like I could breathe. I mean, that's the best way. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. I never knew how to breathe, I think I spent most of my life, liken it to, trying to doggy paddle in a raging river, but you're going against the current. And you're always just gasping, gasping, gasping for air, and wondering if the next surge of water is going to be the thing that takes you under.
Right.
So, but I think that was it. But like I said, I also at first expected, this powerful, like, oh, because at first, it is that kind of pink cloud idea where you walk out and you go, oh my God, I am cured. I'm fine. And then eventually you realize that there's still work to do. And even in writing the book, I realized that healing is like an onion. You just keep pulling back the layers, but it's so much better than the alternative of keeping the secret.
Yes. Speaking about it, writing about it, sharing your story, being an advocate, helping others who are going or who've gone through the same thing as you have, it's very powerful. So thank you
Yeah.
for doing what you're doing.
Now, until 2017, I didn't tell my story outside of therapists, friends. Of course, when I met my husband, I told him, close friend, loved ones, people who I really trusted. So it wasn't until 2017 that I decided that I was going to take the worst thing that ever happened to me and tell it to the whole world. And now I'm used to it. It's funny how it's got, at first it was very traumatizing, and now it's, again, I just keep imagining that there's one person sitting in a dark room somewhere, maybe cutting themselves, because I was addicted to cutting, and maybe hurting themselves in through other neat ways, and that by reading my book, they're going to say, "Wow, if she could find glimmers of happiness and joy, so could I."
Absolutely. Now, for those survivors who are still carrying that shame or fear of even speaking out, what would you want them to know from your own experience?
Again, I think I'd want them to know that they really should tell people, but I'd also want them to really know it's not your fault. I used to hate the word victim. It's very interesting. So I am on the advisory board now for UCLA Rape Treatment Center and Stewart House, and I also volunteer at Stewart House, which provides treatment for children who are sexually abused once a week, and have also been out in the world talking to other survivors and talking about incest. And I've heard a lot of professionals using the word victim. And it took me a bit because, then suddenly it started hitting me that, victim doesn't mean that you're a person walking around, this fragile person walking around in paper slippers, oh, I'm a victim. Oh my God, poor me. Victim means that somebody committed a crime against you. And that's what happened to, this is not your fault. You were assaulted, abused, whether as a child or an adult, and you are a victim of a crime the same way that somebody who gets shot in a robbery is a victim of a crime. And in that crime, they've stolen your agency. So I think that's one of the things I'd tell them. I'd also tell them, please be kind to yourself, because I think we live with the shame. And for me, that shame translated into both self harm and self hatred.
Yes, I had to forgive myself because I was always blaming myself, and I don't know why. I was like, why am I blaming myself? But then I decided, you know what? I'm going to forgive my predator. And even though he never said sorry, I don't know what he's doing now or anything, but I'm like, in my heart, I forgive you because I feel like that's a step for me to heal in a way, is saying, okay, this happened. These are the experiences that I endured. Now, how is it going to shape me into who I'm becoming, and how can I help others use my pain and put it into purpose and help others as well?
See,
And so,
now I never forgave my father completely.
yeah,
I are stronger than I. I mean, he was my father,
it's
and
different. Yeah.
I accepted him for who he was. And actually, I feel sorry for him.
Hmm.
All I feel for him now is I felt relief when he died because I knew he could do no more harm in the world. But I felt sorry for him because, there were two of us. My sister wasn't abused by him sexually, but it was a very abusive household. He was
Hmm.
an alcoholic. And I think, oh my God, this man missed out on having these lovely daughters who could have been such a joy to his life. And
Hmm.
instead, it was just anger and bitterness and abuse. And so that's how I think of him. I did forgive my mother too.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I forgave my mother. First, I gave her grace, and then I forgave her fully. And I write about that. And I do think by forgiving her, I was able to forgive myself as well. I really thought it was my fault for a long time. And I was able to forgive myself for all the self harm and the things that I may have done to myself along the way. So,
Yeah. I
like,
have,
oh, keep going. Sorry.
oh no, I was just going to say that I actually have a picture of my younger self on my cell phone. That I think is a screen
Oh,
lock or something. And I see her every day because I'm always on my phone. And then I just give her grace and compassion and say, you are so loved. You are so loved. Because I just want to hug that little girl that was traumatized or was confused, didn't know what was going on, and felt like the world was crumbling down on her. And I was going through a lot of stuff. In school, I was reading this in your book as well, what you were going through in school, and how a teacher had brought a meeting together with your mom and yourself. I'm not going to do any spoilers.
oh,
Spoiler
you don't
alert.
have to. It's
I want
okay.
everyone to get your book. But I went through the same thing in third grade. I I remember, but I always kept everything inside. I was very sick. So I had developed at a young age. I actually started my period at age like 3 days shy from my ninth birthday.
Wow.
But my grades were dropping, my self-worth was dropping. I was becoming a people pleaser to all of the little girls that I was hanging out with and playing with. I really didn't love myself. And it got so bad that all of my trauma went inside my stomach, and I had some severe stomach issues. And the doctor, because my mom took me to Children's Hospital, the doctor there said, you have IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. But what is the root cause of the irritable bowel syndrome? So my mom's like, oh, just take Gas-X, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I was not fine at age 12. I had to go through, I mean, all that went up to my chest and I was getting panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through what biofeedback, kind of like a hypnotherapy, where
Mm-hmm.
you get into theta brain waves and you're trying to make sure your body is, relaxing your body from head to toe. It was hard. Everything
It,
was so difficult.
And it always goes, I too had behaviors. I chewed my hair. I chewed my hair so much. I write about, my mother's always smacking my hand to get my hair out of my mouth. But what I didn't put in the book, and I probably should have, but I kind of, you think of things after, is I chewed my hair so much. I was thinking about it. The ends of my hair, like probably 2 inches, turned white. It wasn't that, and as a little girl, I thought I had sucked the color out of it. But what really had happened is I chewed the sides so much that it became brittle and dry, and it was 2 inches of split ends. And I just picked at myself, and I felt it. It always goes into the body, doesn't it? For me, it was like I was always itching, itching, itching. And I was always, so now when I itch a lot, I go, oh gosh, I must be really stressed about something. And my throat always felt like it was closing. And I too, ultimately, I had sleepwalking and night terrors, and ultimately I too, had panic attacks. So all of these things, I think it's always in your body. My posture was also kind of what I like to, it's kind of really hunched and not wide. So,
I was the same. I remember my aunt would always tell me, put your chest out, because I'd always go like this. I'd hunch over, I'd put my
mhm,
shoulders like this. And I just had no confidence, though. I just didn't want to.
right.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
for me, it was like I wanted to disappear.
Right.
And I wanted to, and I'm not very big as a person. It's always hard on podcasts, but I'm only 5 foot 3.5. I have to have that half inch.
Yeah.
Like 115 pounds. So I'm not a big person. And as a child, I was really small as a teenager. And I just wanted to always make myself tinier and tinier so that I could disappear.
Yeah, so I was the tallest one in my class for the longest time. And then, I mean, all my siblings are tall. My sister's 6 feet, my brother's 6'7". And then I remember just praying, praying as a little girl, I don't want to get taller. I don't want to be seen. I want to stop growing. Well, I definitely did at 5'5" now, and I
Well,
stayed
that to me is
up.
tall. So there
Oh.
you go.
So I understand what it feels like just to kind of diminish yourself and just
I
make yourself
just,
smaller.
yeah, yeah. It was that kind of, I didn't have thank God, an eating disorder, anorexia, but I did want to disappear. I would have done anything not to be here. So,
I totally understand that. Now, you spend your time advocating for survivors and mentoring young women. How has stepping into this advocacy shaped your own sense of purpose?
well, so that was my unintended gift of the book. I call it so as I mentioned to you, I'm not afraid to say my age because the book starts, it's pretty obvious in the book. I'm 67, but my unintended consequence of the book, or unintended gift that I got, was, I was writing full time, and I was looking for what my third act would be. In the book it says this, but before, I was a lawyer, but before that I was a registered nurse, and so I was like, what is my third act going to look like? Because, I suddenly, writing the book, I realized my third act is giving back to other survivors. This is what my mission, and the book has it's or the book has turned into a platform. People say, "Oh, you have to have a platform for your book when you publish," but for me, it's been the reverse. My book has turned into a platform for my mission, and
Mm,
my mission is to do what I can in a small way, in my own way, to reach out, to be there for other survivors, to support organizations that do really, advocacy work, to write letters, to make calls, and to be part of the solution and part of building awareness of this issue, especially the issue of child sexual abuse, because it's, what is it, 1 in 4 girls now is the new statistic. I think it used to be 1 in 6, and 1 in 8 or 9 boys, it might be lower than that, it are sexually abused before the age of 18. So this happens, and unfortunately, it's a crime. This crime is a crime of opportunity. And the opportunity is usually from people who know the child. We like to, in dramatic kind of made for TV movie. We think of the stranger coming into town and driving and snapping the kid up, but that's not usually the case. The case is someone in the home, someone in the school, someone in the neighborhood that the child trusts, someone in the church. It's always, but this again. So I want to build awareness of this issue and for people to understand. I mean, the title of my book is really important because my family was quite, my father was a professor of English and my mother was a homemaker and then a teacher. And she was quite attractive. And what my sister and I, as I said, if I do say so myself, humbly bragging, we're cute little girls,
Oh, yeah.
and we were to the outside world, a pretty picture. And sometimes people have said to me, "Well, you don't look like someone who would have gone through this." And I go, "What would that? What do you think a person would look like?" And again, my point is, this is not a question of socioeconomics. It is not a question of race. It is not a question of religion. This happens to children in all kinds of families. And I, I hope that, that most are not incest perpetrators or the perpetrators aren't the father, because that compounds things certainly. But they're finding today with all the ancestry DNA that there's more incest than they thought. So, it's just, this is all, I think, this became my mission. You can tell, I'm like, I need the microphone. I can get up there and
Yeah.
preach.
I can see you on a TEDx stage
Yeah, I
sharing
hope
your
maybe one
story.
day.
Yeah, I can see that definitely. Now, your book has been described as a fierce act of reclamation. What does reclamation mean to you personally?
Oh, that. So I think for me, let me just pause for a second. I think for me personally, it was another, and I just closed my eyes to think, but
Mhm.
it was just another instance of finding or reclaiming my voice again. Reclamation means it's the power of finding my agency, declaring it to the world. So that was what it meant to me, and especially in this instance. I mean, when we are childhood sexual victims of sexual abuse, we often lose our agency before we even get it. We never get the chance or the opportunity, especially if it happens young, as you confided it did for you and it did for me as well. We never really, how can you build agency at 4 or 6? You're so little. And even for those who are older, who are sexually abused, it kind of, it severs that agency. And so I think it's being able to regain that control of your own life and that agency that you either never had and needed to rebuild or build for the first time, or that you needed to rebuild.
Beautifully said. Now, looking forward, what gives you hope as you go ahead and continue to do the work that you're doing and share your story with the world?
Well, I get hope from, I talked to quite a few survivors. My book has been out for a little bit for advanced reader copies. And I've gotten some reviews and some notes from people who received the advanced reader copies. I've gotten reviews on Goodreads, but I've also gotten some personal notes. And some of the personal notes that I've gotten about how the book helped them or helped them, realize they needed help. I also talk about it publicly, even in the nail salon. And
Yeah.
I've had people come up to me and say, this happened to me. What do I do? I think being connected with an organization like the UCLA Rape Treatment Center or any local rape treatment center, gives me hope, because there are still these organizations that provide, UCLA provides up to a year of therapy for for children, and I think it's up to 6 months for, it might be up to a year for those over 18. And I think that it gives me hope seeing the people that are dedicated toward to helping other people. And I don't, we'll see what happens with the Epstein files, whether those will give me hope. But it does give me hope to see the young women who were abused having their voices. Well, that's a little tempered hope. So those are the things that give me hope. You know, I, but just seeing people, I've had the opportunity to meet people like myself who have healed or have healed enough that they're managing their own lives and are living, are thriving. So when I meet those people, they give me hope too.
It's beautiful.
Lots of things. I,
Yes.
I I think it's one of my strategies that I learned over the years is that it's really easy to go to a dark place when you've gone through a lot of trauma. And I think reminding yourself of hope and also gratitude are the two, really help you stay closer to the sunlight. So I try to look at things as optimistically as possible and to put that other side of me that's fearful, the side of me that suffers from chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and try to, temper it when it comes up and say, okay, but look at all these things and look at all these hopeful things.
Wow.
So it gives me hope talking to you.
Oh, yes. You're such an inspiration, and I just know our listeners are going to really connect to your story. And I really hope that I get your book. I'm going to go ahead and show it again. Such a pretty picture, Andrea Leeb.
Thank, thank you for the ringing endorsement. I really
Yes, of
appreciate
course. That's why we hit record. We have to get it out there. But this is a question that I ask my guests is what does it mean to shine within?
Ah, well, I think it's practicing self-love. I practicing self affirmations, and sometimes when I'm sitting in meditation, I just feel that sunlight inside and this is going to sound so woo, but it's just true. I feel it in my heart and in my, I guess, in my solar plexus everywhere. I guess in my soul, that light of contentment. And I think it's being able to capture those glimmers of joy and internalize them. But I think it all has to start with self-love, so I guess that's as close as I'm going to come. It's a great question, another great question, but so
Oh, you explained it beautifully because everybody's answer is different, and that's what I love. I always love to get answers from
yes.
all of the guests because they're all different, and they're all correct to me. They're like, "Oh, that makes sense," and I learn from all the guests too when they're giving me these answers. I'm like, how come I didn't think about that?
Well,
So yeah.
it's one of those questions where there really is no wrong answer and
Oh,
it
right.
might change. Like
Yes.
I haven't never been asked that question before. I've been asked a lot of questions, and I've been doing quite a few podcasts lately and speaking more publicly, but I've never been asked that question. So now that I'm going to go, I'm glad I didn't know. I've been not listening to the podcast. Now I'm going to go back and listen to all your podcasts. I didn't listen in advance because I have decided not to prepare myself in that way so that I'm not giving people, I'm giving authenticity as opposed to canned answers. And I'm glad I didn't because it'll be interesting to see. For me, I'm going to put that in a journal and steal it and
Yeah.
see how that changes.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yes, and keep me updated. Keep me
Well,
updated.
I will. I'll come back on and I'll say, okay, Gina, this
Yes.
is what I think now.
Yes, it's going to change all the time. Like we're different every day. And about the woo, I am all woo. So I totally get you. I totally feel what you're saying. And it's like it touches my heart because I'm like, ah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, because that's what it is. It's that light that's within, that self-love that needs to illuminate outwardly, but it has to start within, you know.
Yes.
So yeah. Oh, beautiful. Well, Andrea, where can our listeners go ahead and follow you, connect with you, get your book, all of that great stuff?
So my book is available anywhere books are sold right now. It's available for pre-order. It becomes today. You could order it today. It will get there October 14th, around October 14th, because that's the official pub date. Um, I also have a link on my website, and my website is AndreaLeebAuthor.com. So it's Andrea, AndreaLeeb, author.com. And I also have resources on there. If you are a person that's suffering in silence, I have resources for hotlines and places that you can call. And people can follow me on Instagram at Andrea Lisa Leeb. So it's Lisa, Lisa, Leeb, Andrea Lisa Leeb. Andrea Leeb was taken. And
There's another one
Instagram,
out there.
there's another one out there, but Instagram was new to me, but now I'm a big
It's
Instagram person.
fun.
And so Andrea Lisa Leeb for Instagram. And I appreciate you asking. And I will say I would like to tell your listeners and you that my proceeds, my royalties, my author royalties, not the publisher's proceeds, but my author royalties, be there with whatever they are going to be split 25% to RAIN, which is the Rape and Incest National Network, and also the rest of it to local rape treatment centers, and including the UCLA Rape Treatment Center, but also any town that I'm appearing, I, I'm I'm giving the proceeds for those sales
Oh,
to
wow.
that to a local rape treatment center. This really is a mission. I'm lucky that I had don't need to live right now off my writing. The next book, maybe. The next book, I'll make $1 million and keep it. No, I'm joking. Um,
Yeah.
but this book, seriously, I really want to kind of make do something to support the centers. Rape treatment centers have lost a lot of funding recently,
Mm.
and they're closing. So I want to do whatever I can to help keep them alive for people like me.
Yes, beautiful work that you're doing. Thank you again for the service you're providing to the world. It really will make a difference. And that's what we're all striving for is just to heal. We need to heal.
Correct. And maybe
Yeah,
help by us healing, maybe we can bring a little bit more light to this world.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for being on my show today. I had an amazing time talking with you.
I also had a lot of fun. It was great, Gina.
All right. Thank you.